of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. In-person public participation will be taking place tonight in accordance with the Chelmsford School Committee Public Participation Policy. Anyone speaking tonight during the public input portion of this meeting is notified the superintendent's office of the desire to speak and been provided with these guidelines. Upon request, written comments received no later than 12 p.m. on the date of the meeting will also be read and made part of the record of the meeting during the second public comment session. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. Our first order of business to approve the minutes from our regular meeting on June 3rd.
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of June 3rd, 2025.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any corrections? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. All right, we have no CHS student representatives, so any good news we'd like to share?
Yes, and it's so good that they're not here to steal my thunder. I feel like I'm in competition with them all the time, and they get all the good news. But great news, today was the last day of school, if everybody didn't notice. Congratulations to everybody making it through yet another year. Hopefully the kids are having fun on summer vacation, although it is raining. In other good news, the Chelmsford High School baseball team, if you have not been on Facebook, D1 champs, so that is amazing. Some awesome videos are out there too. People have put together some good montages of all like the highlights from the games. Those kids must be so excited. They got a police escort coming back into Chelmsford. I don't know if you saw any of those with all sorts of drones and good fun stuff. And today was Lions Pride North preschool graduation up at the high school. So very cute little ceremony for those students that will be moving on to kindergarten.
That's great.
All right,
That's
anybody?
good news of the year.
All right, anybody else have anything?
I think the graduation, it was a great ceremony. I personally really enjoyed listening to Mr. Shea speak, right on point about AI, so, and timely. And I enjoyed all the speeches by all of the students, and including Dennison, Dr. Lang, all very good.
Great.
It always makes me feel proud, that moment.
It was good.
All right, anybody else? Okay, all right, any registered speakers?
We do not have any.
We'll move on to new business.
All right, we will jump right in, and we have a couple of presentations tonight. First, we're going to welcome back Maggie from District Management Group. We're going to review some of our year-end highlights from our third year of the strategic plan. We're already 3 years into a 5-year plan. I'm not sure if it was Maggie or Tess that came in January.
Tess.
All right, Tess came in January to do kind of the mid-year review for us, and Maggie's going to walk us through some of the highlights on the end of the year review. So, welcome, Maggie.
Yeah, so you have me today instead of my colleague Tess. She is on her maternity leave, so she had a little boy in February, so if you see her around, congratulate her. But so you are stuck with me today, but two things that we're really going to review today. First is just the end of year updates. We know we've done a consistent job of coming to you all with progress monitoring updates throughout the course of these 3 years. And so I want to give you kind of an end of year update of where we're at the end of year 3. As well as share some of the work that was completed with the Para-Educator Working Group and some of our sort of end-of-year results, if you will, to kind of give you a sense of where that work was this year, the progress that was made, and then the progress that still needs to be made in that change effort for those para-educators to be as successful as possible with students. So those are kind of the two pieces that we will tackle today. We'll start with that strategic planning process. Up here, you just see all the folks who have been involved in this work over the course of the last 3 years. We've been lucky to have a really consistent group of folks. Many of you are included in that group who split their time amongst those 5 priority areas that you see there. This is the 2 phases of work that this implementation has taken kind of every year. So in the beginning, in that first phase, really looking back at the data from the year before, reviewing the progress, making sure that we're making progress towards the targets that were set when the strategic plan was first drafted, and then making sure that there's initiatives that are going to be aligned to those targets and to those priority areas to make sure that we can get where we want to go. And then action planning with each of those subcommittees to make sure that the people and the action steps are all in place to make it happen. Where we spend most of the year then is really just tracking and monitoring that progress, identifying where we might need to problem solve around things that aren't working or continue things that are, and then obviously continuing to communicate what the strategic planning priorities are to all stakeholders and making sure that as we talk about the work of the district, it's really closely aligned to the strategic plan. So that is the two phases of work that have kind of existed for the last 3 years and continued to exist for this year. Obviously, there's a bunch of different structures that go into making that work happen that at this point you're probably pretty familiar with, but we have the district leaders at the very top of the organization who are making key decisions, collaborating with my team, and helping to facilitate those steering committee meetings, that steering committee or that working committee meeting of that group of leaders who are really in charge of making sure that the action plans and the initiatives that were set out in the beginning are actually happening. And then the subcommittees are the ones who kind of do the day-to-day work of the strategic plan. And then we obviously, throughout the course of the year, have been supporting in project management support, helping leaders to make decisions about what changes might need to be made, and then just providing support as needed on an ongoing basis. This is the framework that the strategic plan obviously is aligned with, that you all have seen probably many times at this point, with the mission and the vision, the theory of action, those 5 priority areas, and the initiatives and the action steps are really the piece of implementation that we've been working on for the last few years there. So I won't belabor that because I know you all have seen that several times at this point. But obviously you have Chelmsford's mission and vision that we're always driving towards as a part of those priority areas. Everything we do related to those priority areas is really to get us to this mission and vision for kids and families. And then this theory of action was drafted obviously with the strategic plan, but putting it up there now really around district leaders providing direction, curriculum, resources, principals creating the right conditions and the culture and the buy-in in their buildings, teachers fostering an inclusive environment so that you all will realize the vision that every student will reach their full academic potential, feel confident in themselves and their abilities, and grow into strong community members and citizens. So just underscoring that as we wrap the year of year 3 of the strategic plan, just where we are going and what all this means and is leading to. So 5 priority areas there: academic achievement, equity, social emotional learning, human capital, and operations and facilities. We'll go through each of those and revisit what the target goal was for them, where we landed at the end of this year, and then what the progress on the initiatives aligned to that priority area are. So first priority area here, academic achievement. The district will focus on mathematical achievement, particularly in elementary and middle grades. So that grades 3 and 8 kind of being the focus areas there, to build a strong foundation for academic success in high school and beyond. So what you see here, just orient you to this slide that I know you've seen a few times now. You have the data for 2023, 24, and now 25, with the exception of MCAS, which we obviously don't have yet. And then you see the 2025 target, so where we were going. Where you see outcome there shows basically whether or not the goal was achieved. A green dot means it was achieved. A yellow dot means it was not achieved, but there was growth made from the previous year. And then the red dot means that it was not met and there wasn't growth either. So here on the academic achievement priority, there's 3 metrics for which we have data at the end of the school year. 3rd graders meeting standards in reading based on iReady, 3rd graders meeting standards in math, and then 8th graders meeting standards in math. So what you can see here is that for all 3 of those metrics, there was growth made. So progress made from 2024, you can see that's varying based on the metric, and then, but did not meet the target for 2025, just by a teeny tiny bit. So did not meet is kind of probably an overstatement there. You can see 3rd graders were only 1 percentage point away, as were, but 3rd graders for both reading and math, and then just 2 percentage points for 8th graders in math. And then obviously all of the initiatives were completed for this year related to this priority. This one's a little bit more meaty because there are so many different metrics for the equity priority. You can see that for equity, it's really around 2 big things: 3rd graders and 8th graders, both students for reading and math, and then students with IEPs, so those involved in special education, and students who are economically disadvantaged. So what you can see here is there's a lot of green dots, which is fantastic. 8th graders across all of those different subgroups for reading, for math, for economically disadvantaged students, and students with IEPs exceeded the target growth, met or exceeded the 2025 target for this year. Where you see those red dots are 3rd graders with IEPs in reading, third graders with IEPs in math, and then third graders who are academically disadvantaged in reading. So you can see a little bit of missing the target there for those. And then the status on all those initiatives is those are all complete. The last one around setting targets, goals, and actions to bolster the number of students receiving their services in the least restrictive environment, that will continue into next year. So there's progress being made on that, but that will be an initiative that will continue into next year. In terms of social emotional learning, some mixed results here, but some definite wins. The two questions that are the two topics being monitored for this are student sense of belonging and then students saying that they have a supportive relationship within the building. So what you can see here is that there was some growth in grades 6 through 12 for both of those different topics. So students in those middle and upper grades saying that they do feel a sense of belonging, and they do have the supportive relationships they need. They met the 2025 target for that, you can see there. You can see for grades 3 through 5, there was kind of holding steady for supportive relationships there. So they made growth, but didn't quite meet the goal again by just 1 percentage point. And then in terms of feeling a sense of belonging, a little bit of a drop there from the previous year. So didn't meet the target for 2025. And then this group completed all of their initiatives for this year. For the human capital priority, so this is really focused on the district preparing teachers to really be partners in staff development to ensure strong academic instruction for diverse populations. What you can see here is that for 3 of those 4 metrics, they exceeded the 2025 target, or they met or exceeded the 2025. So staff and teachers who are saying that they are adequately prepared to differentiate for diverse student populations, and the percent of staff who are feeling equipped to provide culturally responsive instruction. So those were the 2 pieces there. The only one that did not meet the target but experienced some growth again there was that first one around teachers indicating that they feel adequately prepared to provide differentiated instruction for diverse learners. Just again, though, by 1 percentage point that they missed that goal. So some growth there as well. And then finally, for the last priority area, operations and facilities, you can see that they met all of their 2025 targets with $2.7 million approved at the town meeting in April, and then all of the work towards migrating work orders into the new platform were completed, and then 100% of APPA assessments completed and a level 2 achieved. So those were all met this year with all of the targets met, all of the initiatives completed as well. So those are the 5 priority areas and where we landed with each of the goals. So a lot of green dots, some yellow dots, a few red dots, if you will, to indicate just where we were at in terms of meeting this year's target on track to the 2027 target.
Why don't we stop here? Anybody have any questions on this part of the presentation?
I have just, going back to the, I guess the equity and to some extent academic achievement priorities, but
Yeah.
mostly equity. And I know it was really specific to 3rd grade. Some of those are, they're not just tiny dips, they're like more statistically significant dips. I remember I was part of the group meeting last week, but I don't remember if there was a deep discussion on theories behind why there is such a dip this year as compared to last year, specifically with 3rd graders and in both of these kind of focus groups. Was there any discussion of that?
There was not. We did not discuss it in the last meeting around that.
Okay, so I didn't
have
just
the-
forget
No,
it.
you didn't
Okay.
miss it. No, you didn't miss it. We didn't yet have all of this disaggregated data yet. We had just gotten the iReady data, and so hadn't had a chance to disaggregate this quite yet. But you're right, in 3rd grade, there are some more significant dips than there have been historically. Historically, we've seen kind of a growth trend for those 3rd graders.
Yeah, and I'd say it's most if you look at the kind of whole group versus equity priorities, it seems most significantly notable with the IEP and economically disadvantaged groups in the 3rd grade. So yeah, I mean, if we don't have an answer for it yet, but I would definitely encourage the group to really dive into that and see if there are any, working theories about that, because obviously we want to make sure there's interventions that, widening equity gaps is not something we want to see from year to year.
And just to that, okay, one quickie.
I just want to follow up. I think it's a little hard when we're only looking at really 2 years' worth of data because they're different students. We don't know the makeup of the students in the 3rd grade from one year to the next. And that that alone could account for it. So I think we need to see more years before we look at it as a real negative.
Well, we could also look at I mean, iReady data would be available for this cohort from second grade and from last year's cohort for fourth. So I think that would be
not a bad
really
idea.
useful, since it's not MCAS data, which is, you can't always get that for third graders because they didn't take it the prior year. But with iReady, they do some iReady in second grade, so I think it might be worth seeing, is it this cohort or is it something that shifted broadly?
Yeah.
So just one of the troubles that we would have for that is we didn't start providing the subgroup information to iReady because we're just, very mindful of student information leaving the district, right, and identifying students. So in order to do that, we'd have to go back and actually go through every child to find out who had an IEP and do the mathematics behind it. It's not as easy, but it would be great. And that's why we realized we needed to really be able to disaggregate this data between regular and special ed. So we started providing that information after, I had an arm wrestling match with the tech director who will be here tonight, who doesn't like that information going out. I won, but I had to use both hands. And so we now have that information, but we'd have to do a little bit more digging, but it would be interesting to find out. And also to follow a cohort of students. And I just always caution people, like, we're using proficiency levels, which is great, but there is that fluctuation. You see like 1 percentage point, is that the end of the world? I would have preferred, in hindsight, we probably should have went with growth, because if a student is here, did they grow, are they moving forward, rather than did you hit an end of the year standard when you may already be 2 years behind? So in hindsight, I can say, like, we should have done that, but here we are now, and that's why we try to look at the growth underneath to make sure that there's nothing major going on. But I agree, we do have to figure out why the dip and how do we get back to where we need to be and then some.
I would just, all of that totally makes sense, and I definitely can appreciate it'll be a lot of work to get that data analysis going, given what I think was probably a really a difficult decision about the data, so I totally get that. I do think, though, as we look at third grade data specifically, I'm going to just say, like, specifically, let's say the economically disadvantaged meeting or exceeding standards in reading based on iReady data. I understand that it's hard to go by proficiency levels when it doesn't necessarily reflect growth, which makes sense. But by third grade, if a student who is economically disadvantaged is not proficient in reading and potentially, I know it doesn't separate who has IEPs and is, doubly indicated, but let's say as a general rule, students who are economically disadvantaged, who are behind in reading, they don't have adapted learning plans necessarily unless they're 504s or happen to be one of the ones who's also an IEP. I'm curious what's happening, it's a dipstick at third grade that reflects what's happened for 3 years prior. So it's not the third grade class growth only, but it's reflecting that up until third grade, there's 28% of students who are not able to hit proficiency that meet that, certain characteristics. So I think it would be worth, although yes, a lot of trouble, worth trying to figure out where, if we can look at them longitudinally over a few years, if we can figure out where those gaps are coming. Is it from the beginning and they're narrowing? Because that would be a different conversation. Or was it that, there was a big dip in second grade and it's making its way up in third? Is it a gap that's widening every year? I think those kinds of things would be really valuable to the district to know.
One of the problems with this particular group is that it's economically disadvantaged, not the IEP, is this is a very moving group. This is a group that changes all the time. So again, I think we were talking about this too at one of the meetings, about how do you set this target? Because I keep on thinking that should be really an individual basis, what each child is doing and how that child is moving forward, rather than comparing it to an entire group's performance. Because there is nothing really, it's not a group that you can go back to and there's the standard, and that's when it should be met. It just keeps on changing. It's not an excuse, but it is a different dynamic in this group.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that.
I don't know, but the fact that it's all third grade is kind of a pain. What is it with the third grade there? And that does raise questions.
Well, we had picked, obviously, like third and eighth, because we administer iReady, we get district-wide data on things, but we said those were two kind of key grade levels. We wanted to see third grade proficiency, and we also wanted to see eighth grade before they go to high school. So those are ones we're just tracking. Later this summer, when Linda puts together the whole iReady report for like all of our grade levels for the year, we'll get a little bit deeper into this. So you won't just be seeing third and eighth, but you'll be able to actually get a little better look at like some of those kids moving through the system and how they've done. So it's not just a snapshot in time, but we can take a look at some of those year-over-year groups. But I think that's going to either be the July or August meeting, just based on when all that data comes together.
That sounds great.
I also like to look at it in kind of a positive framework, that some of the eighth graders may have been identified at a younger age and been getting some interventions, and we're seeing the positive benefits of those interventions, where the third graders are young enough that they may not have had them for very long, so we're just not seeing that yet. That's kind of, I like to look at it in a positive spin, is these interventions are working for those older kids who may have had them for a while.
And if you go back, you asked a question, go back to last year's report on this, there's a lot fewer reds, and a lot more greens, and a lot more, yellows than last year. So what we're doing is getting there.
Progress.
So. All right, any other?
Can I just make a comment for like the listeners? I think the way we've been using this strategic plan is so effective. For people who don't know, the people on the steering committee, we meet every 6 weeks, and we're able to talk with each other so that the people in one group learn what the people in the other group are doing. It's not all these individual groups working on their own. People ask questions of each other and keep track of it. And I just find that this has been a really effective way to keep the district focused very specifically as a whole on where we need to go. I think it's been a wonderful experience, and getting this information. We're seeing the snapshot, but the conversations about all of this have been going on all along. It's not like we're just getting an end of the year report out of nowhere. This has been part of a process that I think works really well.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this part of the presentation? Okay, we'll move on to the paras.
Great. So as you know, as part of that equity priority, there was a focus on making sure that students with disabilities are getting their needs met. And part of that is understanding the role of paraeducators within that. So there were 3 goals for this year around that paraeducator work. The first was to develop and actually execute the training that had been planned last year around the adjusted roles and responsibilities of paraeducators in the district. We wanted to make sure we were defining measures of success and setting goals around that effort and developing tools to figure out, is this working? And progress monitor that change management effort. And then finally, wanted to assess the effectiveness of that and adjust course as we went to ensure success for those paraeducators in the district. So you can see here, that's that same group that we had last year, that we had this year as well, who are really driving this work forward and doing that progress monitoring throughout the year and looking at some of the data that I know that we shared with you all mid-year as well. That work was also split into 2 different parts. The first was just rolling out those new roles and responsibilities, or I should really say those adjusted roles and responsibilities. And then the second piece of that, defining what success was going to look like, developing the progress monitoring tools, and then actually looking at the data. So we're going to spend some time today doing kind of those last 2 bullet points of assessing the effectiveness and monitoring progress and adjust, sharing with you what the rest of the group has seen and discussed. So as you probably already know and have seen, there were 5 different professional development sessions that happened this year, really targeted to those paraeducators that they engaged in throughout the course of the year, a couple in the beginning of the school year, and then 3 throughout the course of October, January, and March. One thing that continuously came back to us as we were doing this work was really rooting it in some of the challenges that came through in that special education opportunity review that was conducted in 2023. And there were a few challenges that you'll remember emerged from that. The first was there was inconsistencies in the amount of time that paraeducators were able to spend directly working with students. There was probably an amount of academic support that was happening from paraeducators that was inappropriate based on their roles and responsibilities. There was notable subbing duties that came through in that study. There was also just some questions about whether or not paraeducators were supporting the right students, if they were able to spend their time supporting students with disabilities as opposed to lots of different groups of students. And then just some unclear reporting structures and just direction for those paraeducators. Those were the challenges that both emerged as a part of that review, but then also in the work with the working group over the course of the last couple years. So when we looked at the data as a whole at the end of this year, there was really 5 key questions that we wanted to make sure we answered. So how much time are paras spending working with students? What are they working on with students? Is it academic? Is it social emotional? How much time are they spending subbing? Do certified staff, so both special educators and classroom teachers, understand what are the appropriate roles and responsibilities for paraeducators, and they can be part of making that work with them? And then do those same staff understand what their role is when it comes to directing and collaborating with paras? So those were the key questions that we set out to answer. So hopefully by the end of this, we will have answered all of those for you. So that first question, do paraeducators spend a majority of their time working directly with students? So the answer is yes. On average, the amount of time that paraeducators report spending with students has actually increased 4 percentage points from when we did this exact same study in 2023. So what we did this year was we actually went back and we had paraeducators engage in that time study again. They spent 1 week recording how they actually spent their time. So you can see the yellow bar is how they reported spending it in 2023. And the blue bar is how they reported spending it in 2025. So you can see that with the exception of a pre-K a little bit and middle school a little bit, on average, parents are reporting spending more time with students, working directly with them than they were in 2023. You can see the average there on the far left there, so 86% of their time working with students. Really great progress that we saw was that notably the time that they were spending on academic instruction was not spent introducing new material, but rather reinforcing material that had already been introduced by the classroom teacher or by the special educator. This was a challenge that was brought up many times over the course of the last few years of how much are paras actually spending working, doing the introduction of it versus the reinforcement. So what we found here is you can see by and large, when paras are working with students on academics, they are reinforcing material. They're not introducing new material, with a slight outlier there at McCarthy Middle School. So to answer those first 2 questions, are paraeducators spending time directly working with students? Yes, they are spending 86% of their time working directly with students. And are they introducing new academic content? The answer is no. That's not a widespread practice. Some paraeducators in the upper grades might still be filling in gaps where students are missing for attendance issues, but by and large, they are not introducing new content. They are reinforcing what is already happening, which is great. In terms of the next question, there are paraeducators subbing classes frequently, limiting their time with assigned students. What we heard anecdotally from paraeducators is a little bit mixed. This shows you their feedback on subbing, which is really around the amount of time that they're pulled throughout the day. So they were highlighting that they were asked to cover classes somewhat sporadically. Sometimes that becomes persistent or consistent. They're worried about being able to actually cover the students that they are assigned to. But that didn't necessarily play out in the data when we had them share how much time they were spending subbing on that schedule sharing time study. So what you can see here is that this is the percentage of time they reported during that week that they spent subbing. So you can see at the high school, they reported spending 6% of their time subbing, but at the middle school, elementary school, and pre-K level, that was 1% or less of their time actually spent subbing. So anecdotally, they shared that they were covering classes, but then data-wise did not report that time actually in that week that we studied. We also pulled payroll data, which allows us to see for folks when they're asked to sub, and it shows up on payroll data because they've subbed for 3 hours or more, what the distribution of that is. So what you're actually looking at here is the number of paras that were asked to sub from 1 to 5 instances, 6 to 10 instances, and so on and so forth. So what you can see here is the vast majority of paras who were asked to sub were asked to sub 1 to 5 times on that payroll data, so 3 hours or more. So again, there's some outliers happening where folks are being asked to sub 21 times or more, but those are few and far between compared. Yeah.
That's for the whole year.
What?
That's for the whole year.
That's for the whole year. That's for pulled, this data was pulled in March. So not for the entire whole year, so until March.
Could you just share what was the week? Do you know when the week was that you?
Yeah, it was in March. It was I believe the week before spring break. I can clarify that for you, Diane.
Figures.
Tricky, sometimes we're just stuck.
Yeah.
we're just stuck for subs. It's not ideal, but
And the one gap that we didn't have, or the one thing we can't see, is the extent to which the subbing is happening in lieu of those paraeducators supporting their assigned students. Sometimes paraeducators are being asked to pull to sub because their student is absent. So the students that they support are not there that day, so they're subbing, but they're not missing out on providing the actual services that they are on the hook for students as well. So that's not totally captured in this as well.
The other thing I'm noting is that, there's the caveat that the payroll data only captures instances where they're subbing for 3 hours or more. And I'm wondering if the anecdotal accounts of lots of subbing are based on lots of, half to quarter day subbing, where they're pulled for a couple of class periods at the middle or high school, or a couple of hours in the morning, or things like that, that wouldn't be reflected in this year-long data, but might be impacting their perception of subbing a lot.
Yeah, there's definitely a limitation to the payroll data. It doesn't capture the true nuance, and that was something that we spent a lot of time talking with the working group about, was how much is small increments, how much is larger increments, because there's definitely limitations to the payroll data.
So this also seems to reflect the problem with not having a lot of subs available, lack of a pool of subs, which makes it difficult.
So in terms of that overall question, are paraeducators subbing classes frequently? The answer is somewhat. So subbing is not frequent, but it does occur. Obviously, you saw that even in the payroll data, there are paraeducators who are doing a decent amount of subbing, suggesting that there's probably to your point, Diana, a need to better understand the data and collect data related to short-term subbing that doesn't show up in that payroll data, and perhaps having a more equitable distribution of subbing responsibilities amongst paras, so you don't have some of those outliers who are doing the majority or the bulk of the subbing. That next question, number 4, do certified staff understand the role and appropriate responsibilities of paraeducators, including which students they are assigned to support? A couple of data points to share here. This is data from the fall and the spring. So we conducted a survey in the fall to understand staff attitudes, special educators and general education teachers regarding para roles and responsibilities. And then we conducted that same survey with them in the spring, so you can compare the fall and the spring here. There were 3 key questions that we focused on. The first was, I understand the refined role of the paraeducator in Chelmsford. My daily roles and responsibilities match that stated. And I believe the refined role of paraeducators is positively impact students. So compared to the fall, when this was first rolled out, teachers did report lower levels of understanding, of belief, and perceived impact of the refined roles and responsibilities. So you can see there's slightly less green and yellow for the spring survey as compared to the fall survey. Similarly, paraeducator responses, they declined as well. So when we asked paras these same 3 questions, or similar enough questions, theirs declined over the course of the year. Some theories that the working group put together were, one, that just we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year talking about it. We spent notably less time towards the end of the year talking about it. So people's just ability to contextualize what was happening at the end of the year versus the beginning of the year may have been limited there.
I also think, knowing just from our discussions at the progress monitoring, is because so much of this was focused on what the paras are doing and not doing, the next phase is to look what the certified teachers are doing and not doing, and that's in the works to look at that. And as that becomes more clarified, I think the answer to that question will as well.
Yeah.
And no one's ignoring that. I mean, I've always gotten satisfactory answers when I've asked questions about where are we going with that piece of it. So I think it's just the next phase.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Susan, and that showed up in some when we pulled the data out for special educators and general education teachers. There's even a difference in those 2 groups. So at the end of the first year, special education teachers reported a much clearer understanding than general education teachers of those refined roles and responsibilities. So we take those same 3 questions and we break out special education teachers versus general education teachers. You can see there's a very big difference there, probably representing some work to do in helping general education teachers to understand not to your point, Susan, not just what is the role of the paraeducator, but what does that mean for me and for my role? And how is that going to need to change and shift as we continue on this change effort? So some differences there as well. We also asked those same two groups of people about different tasks and activities that paraeducators could be doing in their classroom. And we asked them to say whether or not they thought that was an appropriate activity based on their understanding of their roles and responsibilities. So what you see on the left here are tasks that are actually not considered appropriate for paraeducators to be engaged in. So things like monitoring small group testing for students without IEPs would not necessarily be something that paraeducators should be engaging in regularly. For what you see here is the percentage of staff who said that it was okay for them to be engaging in it. So you can see here what this represents is there's some misunderstandings between these two groups of people, special educators and general education teachers, with that same difference between the two, about what is and isn't appropriate. They're not massive numbers of folks who are saying that these are appropriate when they're not, but it definitely represents some opportunity to continue to bring these folks along to better understand what is and isn't okay for them to ask paraeducators to do. So to answer this fourth question, do they understand? The answer is, again, somewhat possibly no for some things. So certified staff generally understand what is appropriate and their overall belief and commitment to it, but there's definitely some things that have decreased as the year has gone on, and those lower general education responses definitely indicate an implementation gap between those two groups of people. And then finally, do certified staff understand their role in directing and collaborating with paras? So this is back to that schedule sharing data again. So folks saying how much time they spent doing a certain activity. In this case, it is collaborating with one another. So despite a slight increase in the district average from 2023 when we did this activity, collaboration for this week that they reported remains pretty minimal overall. Some high school collaboration decreasing and some limited gains that you can see there for pre-K and for middle school. But overall, people are not reporting that they are spending a lot of time collaborating. So this is paraeducators reporting that. And then we also saw that in the qualitative data from both that schedule sharing activity and the survey that we did. Some top barriers for collaboration from the rest of staff were just the lack of time to actually do the collaboration, some scheduling and staffing challenges, role confusion, and just hesitancy to give that feedback and provide any kind of collaboration or feedback to those folks. We also asked the question for paras, I am able to effectively collaborate with special education and or general education teachers. And you can see that they actually had a different response, that they said they felt like they could collaborate. So there's a little bit of conflicting evidence here that makes us think that we just need to learn more about what collaboration means to different groups of people, and how they might be defining collaboration, because there's some sort of disagreement in the data, but given who you ask. And then finally, this last piece here, we heard a lot from general education teachers specifically that they don't feel comfortable providing feedback when they're collaborating with paraeducators. So again, coming back to this idea of what is the role of the general education teacher when it comes to that relationship with the paraeducator in their classroom or otherwise, and how can we better support them to figure out what does feedback look like for them and what is appropriate amounts of feedback. So all on one page here, you can see the answers to these questions. Do certified staff understand their role in directing and collaborating with paras? We would say no. Based on the data, they probably don't understand what their best role is. That's not to say that no one understands their role, but overall, there was a lot of trends in the data to suggest that folks might need a bit more development to understand what that relationship needs to look like. I will stop there and open it for questions.
All right, any questions?
Oh, one thing I didn't touch on was sort of where to go next.
I was going to say,
realized
I
missed
feel
that
like I was
piece
going to
there.
bring up something that you've already.
Great. The first thing I think that needs to happen is just going back to that document, that roles and responsibilities document, and saying, where did we leave ambiguities that might need to be solved for and made clear? So I think that's step one, is to say it's been a year. Let's go back to that document. Let's take a peek at it, figure out where there might need to be adjustments or clarifications needed. So I think step one. Step two is to re-engage school leadership in this conversation, because they're a really big piece of this puzzle and they're a really big lever to this change. So we're going to engage them in the coming weeks here to make sure that they understand all of this data, understand what it says, create their own hypotheses and analysis about that. And then finally, really focusing in on those general education teachers and figuring out what kind of support they need to both understand but also implement this with fidelity in a way that is equitable to them and make sure that students are getting what they need in the classroom. So 3 kind of key next steps there to outline first. Now we can ask questions.
Any questions?
It's good.
Yeah, no, I just comment, I like the way it was presented. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this, and to see, here are the questions, here are the answers, and, that's,
I really appreciated the framing and the kind of the depth of the exploration and analysis. So I think that's really great. I'm glad you brought up the slide that you hadn't previously, because I was going to say I really like the next steps. I think they're the right ones. And I will be curious to see how this continues to evolve in the year ahead. It's clearly not a done deal. It still needs to keep going. I don't know if this was framed initially as sort of a sunsetting initiative, but it's clear that there still needs to be an ongoing focus.
Yeah, this was actually a pretty significant piece of the work, and it ties right to the equity strategic plan goal. But I do want to just take a second to say that the working group, who really kind of convened 2 years ago to take a look at this, it was a group of the district administrators, building administrators, paraprofessionals from each level of the organization, put a lot of time into 2 years ago, kind of really doing a deep dive into this. And then they agreed to stay on this past year and met several times over the course of the year to talk about what was going well with the rollout, what areas could be improved. So they've been really a good sounding board for this whole process. What we're going to end up doing now, because that group obviously has been intimately involved with it, next week when we have our kind of final admin meeting for the year before we kind of break and do some stuff for the summertime, we're going to share all of this information with the district and building administrators because they need a report out. And then this will kind of get them a little refresher as we start to talk what the initiatives and plans for next year are going to be, how we might respond to or put some things in place that address some of these different findings. That'll be work that'll continue over the summer. And then in August, as we're setting our goals, obviously be able to do that. But I did want to give a shout out to the working group because I think they've been very supportive and helpful in this process. And it'll be good to be able to share this data with the building and district administrators too, who might not be as involved in this particular initiative because they're the ones in the ground kind of seeing what's happening day to day as we continue to work on this. But this wasn't a sunsetting thing. This is actually part of our work that needs to continue. And we need to just keep taking those deeper dives into it and keep refining it.
One of the things that I think is imperative is we saw that, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, those perceptions changed a bit. And so now we start a whole new year next year and possibly quite a few different faces and bodies and paras and teachers and so on. So just making sure that from the beginning of the year, that role is well-defined and all 3, paras, general ed and special ed teachers really understand the role and continue to throughout the year. Every year is a new group. So I think that will be a test next year, whether we can really keep on doing it. And if one of the subgroups of equity is a moving target, these groups continue to be a moving target too, because there's so much change throughout the year. So,
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much.
Maggie, thank you very much.
So much.
Good presentation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, of course. Linda, do you want this clicker back?
Yeah, I'll go back.
Okay.
Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all.
thank you.
Congrats on finishing another school year.
Have a good summer.
All right, we will now shift to our second presenter tonight, Bill Silver, our Director of Technology, with a technology update from this past year and then a little look ahead into his work for the coming year.
Thank you.
He's better at the technology.
I was going to say,
stuff than I
he
am.
doesn't need help.
He's now going to give us all the answers.
He will, he will.
Let me connect to this.
No, I'm saying nothing.
Jay wanted to know if you needed help. That's
I
right.
lost my
Yeah.
mouse. Yeah.
You can take your time, Bill.
You know, you used to get presenter notes on this without shutting off mirroring. Now you have to shut off mirroring, so this is like a blank screen. And you have to run it from there until this comes up. It's, I don't know, we should do something about that. All right. Well, it's been a quick year since I've seen you all, so I hope everyone had a great year. We finished up school. Technology was very busy, as always. I'm going to take you through some snapshots of sort of different accomplishments this year and let you know about a few upcoming items that we have on the agenda. Tonight's agenda is, first I'll just recognize my team, as I always do. We'll review some of our completed roadmap items. I'll take you through the upcoming items and then some highlights from the year. My team, and I say this every time, they make it fun to come to work, right? Because they come and deliver a level of excellence every single day. And so when I was thinking about how do I best describe them, there's this quote, which was perfect to describe my department, and that's, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." And that's truly how that department acts. And by the department, I don't just mean the technicians, I mean all the educators that are part of my department as well. They really do take what they do seriously, and they do a great job. All right, we'll get on to the roadmap and the completed items. So you might recall last year we had a technology assessment done, and overall, all the feedback we got was very positive. They did suggest two things. One was to build out a long-range tech plan, and one was to establish a steering committee. So we had plans to reestablish a steering committee. They tend to be done about every 4 years. Last year happened to be the year that it was coming up. And during the steering committee, we went ahead and built a long-range technology plan. So it's not like we didn't have any idea what was happening, but for the last several years, districts have not been required by DUSI to actually put it on paper and turn it in to be able to get E-rate funding or things like that. And I always know where we're going with this stuff, but it is a good idea to kind of put it down, and then we have a checklist that we can go through. And that's all shared out on the website. You can see the roadmap items and the things that we are going to try to accomplish each year. And the roadmap items kind of look at those various areas, which is infrastructure, security and safety, general equipment, applications, like our subscriptions for curriculum, classroom tech, student and teacher devices, and professional development. It really kind of is a wall of text, so I just gave you guys some pictures and I'll talk through some of these pieces. But in the infrastructure area, we were going to investigate internet services, so we do this through E-rate. We signed 3-year contracts, and I can tell you that we renegotiated our internet services, filter and firewall. We have LineWise as our filter. We have Palo Alto as our firewall, which is industry leader, and we probably have the most bandwidth of any district in the state. I would say we have 15 gigs of bandwidth. We also looked into air handling systems for IDFs and MDFs, which frequently overheat on us. Schools were not built to have kind of data centers, and they got put in all kinds of random places when we sort of started implementing technology in the early 2000s. So we were able to fund 10 different closets that were constantly giving us trouble, and those are now cooled properly and dehumidified properly. We've been working pretty consistently for the last couple of years on cleaning up the wiring in MDFs and IDFs. This year we worked on the PAC, and that used to look like a real kind of just rat's nest of all kinds of stuff. And you can see in the pictures on the bottom left, we put in some of the ladder tray, and everything's really tidied up. We really wanted to do the pack because, as you'll see a little bit later on, we do have a big project coming up in there. And so we wanted to get this ready for that. Another huge one this year was we implemented multi-factor authentication on all staff accounts. And the staff was great going through this process. We basically just visited a school with the entire team, one a day, and kind of chugged through it. And everyone moved over to MFA, which was excellent. And since then, we have not had one account compromised, so that's pretty positive. And that's pretty much a wrap there. On the safety and security, we were going to investigate a new handheld radio system for the district. So we did that. We chose Motorola. We have an excellent radio system now. We have no complaints like we used to have. There are 2 repeaters in every building, antennas on, I think, 6 of the 7 buildings. You can pretty much get signal almost across the town because we have radios that we travel with. There are just a few little areas like on the way to Byham where you lose connectivity for a moment.
To
But
be fair, Byham's pretty far from everything, just clear.
it is. And really, we're really focused on what's the communication like in the building, and that's been superb. So we're happy, very happy with that. We were also installing hardware last year to allow all the panic buttons to work and a speaker and LED alert system. You might have recalled me talking about that. So we did install these. We kind of, give it an acronym ENS, so it's Emergency Notification System. This is basically allows the principals to set one of 3 alerts in their building. They can have a full emergency, which is like an Alice type of emergency. They could set a hold in place, and they can set a building evacuation. What happens is the LEDs light up, the speakers play a pre-recorded message, and we really focused last summer on areas who had a hard time hearing PA announcements, maybe outdoors, gyms, kind of common spaces. So that's what we were really focused on. We did test those systems. We actually just had the Ed Davis group in doing a second security kind of audit, and they watched the Alice drills, and they watched how those button pushes played out. Police also get an alert when those are pressed for every single thing that happens. They see everything in dispatch. Let's see. And then, of course, on this, we do physical inspection of all the cameras every summer, double check all firmware updates are done, update the NVRs. We also replaced all the 4-lens cameras, which are in the entryway of every building. They were probably the original cameras that were installed, so they weren't always as clear as we wanted them, so now that's been enhanced. All right. Equipment, this was really pretty general. We added to our inventory for some staff and admin laptops and desktops. The biggest thing that was kind of a real necessity out there was to replace all the headphones in K-4, which seems like it's a small thing, but there's over like 3,000 units when you put them in every single classroom. So we found a decent model that wasn't super expensive but wasn't super cheap, and we went ahead and did that during last summer. These get significantly shorter, which is good, and this one has text again. So each year we take a look at how we're using our different subscriptions, and we'll add and remove as necessary, kind of based on the usage that we see staff using the subscriptions. We're going to investigate Google Gemini, which we did, and curiously, we just got an email from Google tonight before we came into this meeting, but they were trying to charge districts for using Gemini, and the charge was outrageous. It would have cost us in the vicinity of almost $250,000 to buy every staff member a license. Nuts. But they just said in August they're going to provide this to to all education customers that purchase current licenses for Google, and it will become part of the subscription. So that was good news. And then obviously investigate some alternative AI offerings. We did recommend a product to staff called Magic School. It's kind of like a safe AI usage area, and it really kind of prompts the teachers to see, what am I going to use this for? What is it that you want me to do? It's not them sort of like driving the show. The platform kind of helps them figure out what they want to do, and that helps them create. We didn't purchase anything, but also I will tell you that next year for professional development, it's going to be heavily focused on AI for the district, so that will be excellent, and we can probably have better recommendations by the time we see all the staff trained. Classroom technology, we're beginning a multi-year interactive panel refresh, so we started that a number of years ago. We finished kind of right around COVID. So some of those panels are getting up there in age, so we're going to begin this process. We're going to replace about 120 this summer, and hopefully continue to do that year over year. We did firmware updates for every panel that we do have now, so we're on the last available firmware updates for most of those. One thing that teachers have been asking for years was a classroom management tool for the Chromebooks. And we've had the ability to implement a tool. It's part of our filter. But the reason that we never did is because it allowed people to basically take over or view the screen of a machine if you're a student inside any Google Classroom. And as you all know, a lot of staff and administrators are students in other Google Classrooms, so we don't like the idea that someone could possibly, potentially see a staff or administrator's screen. But the company changed the protocol about who can see what, and so now it's just staff members can look at student devices and what they're doing while they're in their class. So everything is still linked through Google Classroom, but the restrictions are at least in place so that it's all one-way piece. That got piloted for a couple of months with a small group of teachers, and then it went really well. People have really embraced it. It gives teachers the ability to do things like see how many tabs are open on a kid's device, what's on those tabs. They can pause the internet. They can focus students to a specific website. So there are a lot of good features and benefits to that. And
So, quick question. So I remember some middle school teachers here once talking about the challenge of kids doing other things.
Yeah.
That gives the teachers the ability to see what those other things are.
yeah, and stop it, right? So,
But they can monitor it.
Right.
Excellent.
yeah. And then a final piece of classroom technology is, we like to make sure that we attend different technology events and keep the group up to speed on new technologies that are coming out. So I did have a group attend both MassQ and the WCA Technology Conference this year. Student and teacher devices. Each year we'll do a purchase of one-to-one devices and teacher devices. And we refurbish everything that comes back and get those ready for redeployment into elementary schools. We have not selected next year's device just yet. We had 4 manufacturers come and sort of show us their new models. We've been with one brand for the last 4 years, but I thought it was important to sort of get groups out to compete for that business again and see what their best offers were.
Can I ask you a question on this one,
Yes.
Bill? So, it says, this last item, bullet item here says you would refurbish and then replace and update anything in the elementary classrooms.
Right.
So, grade 5 through grade 12, they have their own device. But in the elementary level, a device is available for each child, but it stays in the classroom?
Yes, so there's a cart in each classroom that has about 20, usually around 26 to 28 devices.
So what happens, because I'm thinking back to those third graders,
Yep.
okay, and the kids that don't have access, because we were talking about the kids who might not have be as economically advantaged. So it may be they don't have a computer in their own home, or their parent doesn't know how to use the computer to help them, and they're still second or third graders and whatever. Do they get to bring a computer home if they need it? Because iReady has to be practiced, I believe, a certain amount of time. No?
They don't do homework.
They don't bring it home?
They don't, nobody has homework in any of that, so.
Oh, okay, I don't know. But if they don't have access to the computer in their own home, are they allowed to? What
Well,
happens?
that's a good question. We do have, as you could see from data, right, some ELL population that maybe needs some of these things, or some disadvantaged population that could benefit from borrowing a device. So we're fortunate. We've done a good amount of purchasing. We've gotten a lot of grants, so we do have some surplus of Chromebooks. And we actually just reached out to the ELL department and asked them which of your students could benefit from taking something home for the summer, this and that. So we have about 10 students who could benefit from that. And so we prepared devices for them to borrow over the summer, and potentially longer if that's what they need. So the short answer is yes, we do have some available to do that. We do not have enough to do every K-4 student, but we have enough to certainly help some folks who really need it.
Great, okay.
Okay, and the last component of the plan was professional development. So we introduced a new application this year called Nearpod. We did a TIS group did an awful lot of training on that. It seemed very well received by the staff. This was sort of a repository of all kinds of pre-done lessons that they could then modify to meet the needs of their curriculum. Any AI PD this year, this was limited to a small group, so my integration specialist received some. We also did have a group go to MIT. It was called Day of AI. That was comprised of myself and then some teachers, a guidance counselor, and we tried to get a variety of folks from across the district to participate. That group really loved what they learned that day. They did a follow-up professional development in May, and this summer, they're actually taking a course that's designed to help them prepare professional development. And then next year, we hope to have them run some of the professional development for the rest of the staff. We did offer a graduate class this year in project-based learning, and the first round of it was just project-based learning, but we added AI tools into the second round, and that just wrapped up. It was well attended, so we do have teachers who are starting to gravitate towards learning more about this. And I think next year, once we do all the professional development, we'll see really good use of this tool. And then, of course, the TIS group, they always offer learning opportunities. They have one-to-one meetings. They'll come in, they'll co-teach with teachers. So there's plenty of opportunity for staff to be supported in technology. All right, these are some of the upcoming items. So we are partnering with a group to put in an MDR, which is a managed detection and response system. So that basically, it's a cybersecurity protection. We'll have monitoring happening 24/7, 365, with all kinds of data being gathered and then reported on to us. And it will also have endpoint protection included for all of our Macs, all of our PCs, all of our servers, things like that. So we're excited about that, and it should put us in a good spot to hopefully really ramp up what we're doing as far as protecting our systems. And then I talked a little bit earlier about the emergency notification system. So that project went really well. I think it was really well received, and we always had plans of sort of implementing that on a larger scale and hopefully having it take over some other systems like our clock system, like our PA system. Some of these things, these systems that we have, they're a little bit ancient. Our PA system, all of our speakers were wired basically when these buildings were built. and you can't do a heck of a lot with it except rip everything out and rerun the wire. So this is going to give us an opportunity to have an IP-based system, which means everything will run off the network. And we have been asking Axis, who we do most of our security business with, to build something for us. We wanted something that would have the LED strobe, something that would have a speaker, and something that would have a clock, all built together in one item. These are the two on the screen. One's sort of a classroom clock, that's sort of the rectangular oblong one. The one that's a little bit wider is actually two-sided, and we envision putting these like in hallways. So if a button press happens, these will also light up, these will also make announcements, and then the second benefit to it is that they'll also become the PA system. So if a principal needs to page the whole building, they certainly can do that. Every classroom will hear it. It'll be much louder than it is now. This will also allow principals to page from their walkies if they need to, which they can't do now, so that'll be a huge upgrade as well. And yeah, so this is going to be quite a project, and I want to take a moment here to just let you know about one of our employees, which is our cybersecurity and network operations employee, Jason Marcoux. He's really sort of spearheaded this implementation. He's become certified in the Access Camera Station system. He's done all of the programming for these for the notification system, and just really worked hard at making the system what it is. He was actually recognized a couple of months ago. The police department sent a nice note over to the superintendent, just talked about his collaboration skills, his communication, and how lucky we are to have something like that. So I just wanted to take a moment and call that out and just let you know what a good job he's doing. This summer, vestibules will be built at all the remaining schools, the Byam Center, Harrington, South Row, and Parker. So we're looking forward to that. We have 2 right now. I think that's done a really good job at sort of controlling the flow of visitors to each building, making sure they're checked in appropriately. Every single school now does have a visitor management system, scans IDs, it checks different registries to make sure that they're not on any of the registries, and then we'll print out a badge. So this will be a nice addition to each building. Then a couple of enhancements that are happening this summer. The Byam Library, that's getting a completely new furniture, paint, and lighting, similar to what we did at the Harrington last year. Those buildings are kind of replicas of each other, so it was the next logical one to work on because the Harrington was really well received. The kids really loved it, and the librarian really loved it too. So that was a good investment, and I'm sure this will be as well. Our language lab, we put all new hardware in the lab last year. And then one thing that was sort of failing a little bit this year was some of the seating. So we went ahead and replaced all the student seating. Where I told you we were beginning the interactive panel refresh, so that's the beginning of that. In the ELL space, we piloted something called the Vasco V4. This is a handheld device, and it will translate 82 languages with 97% accuracy. The neat thing to it is that you can link these. So if you have in the class 4 different languages being spoken, they can all speak in their own language. It will translate it to what they need to hear it in, and vice versa. So it's I think a really good tool for teachers and students. And then we also took a look at something called Xerox Workflow Central. This is a software tool that will translate basically any digital document. We had all the ELL teachers, or most of the ELL teachers, pilot this. They loved it, so we're going to go ahead and implement that. It also will come with a copier that you can take any document, scan it, it will on the fly translate it, and then print out a copy. So that'll be housed here, and I think that'll be a nice enhancement as well. Then at the PAC, we are going to go ahead and replace the entire sound system there. So that, I think, has been needed for a while. You know, Tom does a great job in there, and he kind of has the system that he built out for that space. It wasn't even the original system that was installed there when it was built. To my understanding, it was well before my time here, but that never sort of worked exactly as it should. So this will really enhance that space. We had the fine arts teachers come in, we had student performers come in, so we could test these systems, and then went ahead and selected the best one for that spot. We're almost done, I swear. All right, grant awards. Every year we get some. PLTW, we got $15,000 from Lockheed Martin. They're a pretty regular contributor to us. We really appreciate that. The 1-8 group gave us $3,600, and that was for the applied learning for manufacturing and engineering. Innovation Pathways was almost $30,000. E-rate for our internet services was almost $50,000. And there is the SVPP grant, School Violence Prevention Program. That's kind of an ongoing one. We will try to get an application into that this year. And one last slide here. This was our service request. So we handled about 9,400 tickets this year. Average response time was 5.6 hours, which was down from 7.4 last year. And the average closure was 2.3 days. So
What are
that's
you using for the ticket system? I'm just curious.
Incident IQ, it's called.
Good response time.
Yeah, this group really, like I said in the beginning, they get after it, and they really do support our end users, so very happy to have them, and I'm proud of their accomplishments.
Anybody have any questions, John?
Might as well just go. No, this is all really great work. So a couple comments. First of all, I don't think people realize like how much like preventative maintenance on like things like closets when they're all jacked up like that, how much it can actually do to all that capital that we put into those closets, right? They get dirty, they get clogged up, they break down faster. And so that work is actually really quite important. Love the work you did with the translator. They spoke about those the other day at one of the meetings, and they said how really great they were, so that confirmed that. Love the idea of doing something with the PA system, and I'm really happy with all the tickets. Probably my biggest thing is I'm glad we're doing MFA now with all employees. I hope that continues to move outward, both, I don't know if it's the same for admin, but for school committee members, and everybody should have MFA at this point. I mean, there was just a data leak, just based on somebody's, lost credentials, that actually hurt a lot of people, including students. So I'm glad you're taking all those things seriously. So no other comments, no real questions, just thanks for the work.
Okay, thank you, John.
Right?
A question. A little bit on the AI. When I read the report, it says that a group has been attending that MIT collaboration that's going on here. And one of the things it mentions is that there was a point on policy. There was some kind of presentation on policy. It would be, is it possible to have access to that information? Was
Yes.
anything handed out?
Yeah, we didn't share it out globally, but we do have a copy of the presentation that was done. So that was PD that was done in-house. And because that's obviously an important next step, right? We have to start using some of this stuff sometimes without policy, but not with students yet. And that's why we've sort of kind of slowed down on that front. We want to take the year to, train teachers. That will also give us time to start to help you all craft the policy that we want ultimately to guide the use of AI.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are still struggling with that. I mean, even the state really hasn't come out and said, here's the guidance, this is what we want you to follow. There are like little bits and pieces of information floating around. So I do think it's going to be an important topic that this group will really need to discuss, and
Yeah.
we will.
It would be wonderful to have, if we could have access to that, or maybe we do some kind of workshop or something ourselves as a committee to get some of that information on what an AA policy would look like. The more I'm listening, the more I seem to, because it's great that the staff and the teachers are getting into it and understanding it and so on. And at some point, that's going to become a contract issue too, which we need to understand well. But in addition to that, I think that especially at a middle school level, moving up into the high school level, it's a matter of trust. You know, if you're gonna have a staff member who maybe is going to be correcting papers using AI, or is going to be doing their whole teaching based on it, whatever, at some point, some sixth grader and seventh grader is going to say, if you can do that, I can do this too. And so I think it's really important that we think about the policy in depth, you know, in what we allow and don't allow, and what's part of the contract and what isn't.
Right, yeah, you make good points, and part of that training did sort of discuss, like, you know, if you're going to allow students to use it, what those parameters are. Maybe for some types of assignments, they, you know, they can ask it a couple of questions for something. On a different assignment, they can have it proofread the essay that they wrote and maybe give some suggestions. So it's about like figuring out what are the best ways for students to use it for various assignment types. The key.
AI is just a tool. And I think the other thing we have to talk about policies, not just with students, but how are we going to use AI internally, right? So like AI agents, things we can do to bring efficiency to the district. We have to talk about both those things, not just the students, but also how we're going to use it internally with our own data, so.
Yeah, and then at what age, because the development of skills at the lower level, you know, first grader's got to learn how to read, second grader, and so on. And if the machine's going to read it for them, that's a problem. So, you know, got to try to figure this out.
You're right. It's a huge task.
That makes it fun for you for next year, Bill.
Hey, it will be a great tool, I think, ultimately.
is.
Like, I'm sure this discussion probably happened well prior to when I was in this business, when the internet was sort of being
Yes.
introduced to schools.
Yes.
So, you know, we've dealt with hard things in the past and we'll continue to do that, but we'll do a good job.
So I'm going to end my comments with this. I was a PTO member from grade 1 for my children, and Mrs. McKinnon was teaching them at that time. But I remember that we were working as PTOs to raise money to get some iPads into the elementary level, give it to teachers so they could start to learn how to use the iPad and so on. We're looking at, 15, 16 years ago. This is where we are today.
Right.
This is pretty amazing. Where we're going forward, even more amazing. So it's a great opportunity to, you know, get that policy there and make all the possibilities of making it work right.
You're right.
And thank you. Thanks for all the hard work and your staff as well.
Thank you.
So just an ask to follow up on that. I mean, what I know about AI is very general. And before I could make a really informed decision about policy, I would have to learn a lot more about what we're talking about in terms of what teachers would do, what students would do, what is appropriate, what isn't. I think we kind of need a little education ourselves before we jump into looking at what a policy could possibly be.
I feel like I need an invitation to our professional development next year. So
Almost,
we'll
huh?
see you there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Diane, any other question?
No, I don't. I was just going to say, I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate the detailed reporting.
I just, all those things that you're suggesting with the security upgrades and, you know, the ENS and all that, those all look terrific. I guess to you, is all this in the budget? Is this something we're gonna look at doing one-time spending on? What is it?
No, it's a little, I mean, combination. Sometimes it's one-time spending, sometimes it's pieces that are already in the budget. I think on the emergency notification systems, you were thinking about piloting one school this year to kind of really.
This will be piloted at the Harrington. I maybe did not tell you that, but so it will be just one building that we're gonna kind of do soup to nuts and make sure it works exactly as we want it to.
Okay, yeah, so we'll like piecemeal it. So then if we're successful with that and we really like how it is, we can quantify the value. Yes, that could likely be either a capital project for the town or one-time spending money for us, say, a year from now.
Okay, how about the upgrades of the pack? How's that?
That was already one time.
Okay, one
You
time.
approved that this
Okay, great.
past spring. I forget if it was March or April, but that was one of our first ones to do.
Great,
So, is that on track for the summer?
It is.
Okay.
all right.
All
All right,
right.
anything else?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Bill,
you
thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jason, too.
Oh, do you want to come off?
I do.
All right, moving on through the packet, the next couple items actually Linda was nice enough to help put together Candace's assistance on the school committee side, kind of a rolling list of some of our accomplishments for the year that tie to our school committee goals. As you know, when we set the goals in the fall, we kind of track through the course of the year. Progress are made, things that we're doing, and ultimately we'll be taking this into consideration when we start to put our goals together for next year. So I don't know if you wanted to speak to it, but the first set of the school committee updates for this current year.
No, but basically, what we'll typically do at this point of the year is go through and look at our goals and then go through the agenda packets, for the year. So, and see at what point did we address some of our goals. And interesting, as I was doing it, like the very first meeting of the year was the DM group came in and did their little thing, and then they came in a little later. And it kept linking back to our goals. I'm thinking, wait a second, our goals are based on our strategic plan, so it kind of made sense, So a lot of these are repetitive because it does link back to the strategic plan and some of the other things, school improvement plans and that type of thing. But just try to go through and kind of highlight, where we address certain things. Some areas we addressed a lot, some areas we addressed a little bit less. Those things we can work in the future. But and I think the superintendent did more or less the same thing on his end.
Yeah, we did the same thing. And one of the things that you kind of mentioned, I do think it's important, and it served us well to kind of have the coherence between what individual schools are doing and how their goals feed up to the strategic plan, how the school committee goals are aligned, how the superintendent goals are aligned. And it's not like we're all off doing different things, but we've all identified these 5 priority areas in the district. And our budget aligned so that our resources are really supporting those particular areas. And as you mentioned, like individuals have been able to take part in those, the strategic plan review meetings every 6 weeks to kind of keep track of how things are going. Certainly, there's going to be different areas we might want to emphasize for next year. Other things are still going to stay on, but they might take less of a focus. But it's been a good, I think it's been a good process to have us all be on the same page with that. And it's very interesting. So when you do look through the school committee, and then when you even just look through my updates, it does really kind of just map back to the different action steps that we identified where we were going to focus our time this year. So we did that for the school committee as well as the superintendent updates. And this, again, once we have it finalized, if anyone wanted to give comments on either, we certainly can, and we post this up to the website. It is surprising, I will hear from people from time to time that will go and just kind of look at our strategic plan and even go to read the reports about how we're doing. I don't think all districts actually do that, go back up and kind of update your progress on it. And again, there's certain areas we excelled in and certain areas we need to focus next year a little bit more emphasis on. But we'll get these up on the website as well, just for the public when they are looking at this, so that they can also track our progress. And it is amazing when we met with Tess and, that was Maggie, but when we work with Maggie and Tess, that we're already 3 years into the plan is kind of crazy, because it just seems like we were putting it together right coming out of COVID. But we're already going into year 4, and then as we enter year 4, we obviously have to start thinking about getting into year 5, but you're running kind of parallel with putting a new plan together for the subsequent 3 to 5 years. So I do think working with them has been excellent. I think keeping them on as a partner to help us do the mapping and the updating of the strategic plan has been valuable. So we intend to do that again next year.
I think the focus areas have been pretty substantial in looking exactly what a school district should. So even as we go into the next phase, they may not change that much because they're super important. It's more the action steps may change. Those are things that are always going to be important in schools, the academics, the social emotional, the equity, all those things are not going to end in 5 years.
I think what will be interesting, I agree with you in terms of like the macro categories. I think
Right.
underneath it, there's going to be some shifting foci. I mean, when this was created, nobody was really talking about like school ethics around AI, for example, just building off our last conversation. There may need to be goals into the next strategic plan that really look at the evolving role of that aspect of technology, for
Yeah,
example.
we're not going to stay focused on math always.
Yeah, exactly. Or
major
the academic
areas.
foci may change, but the categories are broad enough to potentially include more kind of discrete goals that, target evolving needs.
And I think too, as the size of our student body may change and where those increases happen and so on, will also impact greatly strategically what we would do. So for now, that last report is always a wonderful green, that
Or the facility
the
one?
operations and the buildings and so on, but it can get hard because of what we may face in the next few years. So I think things change and priorities may
Right.
change as well. So, and I personally think it's so important to have some outside vision when you're doing strategic planning and thinking, and then steering it. Because when you try to do it just from internal,
100%.
one, the expertise may not be here, and then when the expertise is, it's, that person just focuses on that, and not on what their role should be, and so on. So I'm a big one for having that outside perspective.
Facilitation is
100%
an
agree.
underrated
Yeah.
expertise, for sure.
So as far as these, if you take a look over you don't, obviously there's a lot of stuff, but if you think some things are missing that we covered, or, as we go to develop our new goals, if you look at an area, go, wow, we really didn't do as much there,
Yeah.
whatever, I know policy is on there, and we didn't really probably get as far as we wanted, because we had other things going on, but, so those are, kind of give a framework for that work too, so.
That would be good.
Yeah, and just real quick, there is like interplay, obviously, within the facility stuff. Like over this next year or so, we're going to get a direction for the potential new middle school. And that's obviously depending on the grade configuration and what we want to see in this building. We're going to have to realign some other things we're doing in the district to match that. So I think it actually is kind of timely that we're coming up on years 4 and 5, because then we'll kind of know what we're doing with the middle school project. So it's exciting. But yeah, open any feedback, so if anyone wants to add, edit, or whatever, just send it along.
Yeah.
And we'll ultimately get those up on the website this summer, just for the public.
As they were providing the update, the DM group was providing its update, Mary, I was just thinking about the teacher pathway. And that came out of really the strategic, also part of the strategic plan, because in your group, Joanne, I'm just thinking, remember you were talking about how do we reach out to more people so that we have a more diverse group of people, a pool of applicants in the future and so on. And your group came up with, well, we have students here and, maybe we need to build up that pathway and so on. And this year, we have the first signing for how many students? 13, 14? Who are leaving our school with that in mind. And I think that that's just a great example of how, it helped a lot in making everything come around. It's great.
Great. Good.
Okay. Any questions on this? Right.
Next up it is that time of year for the superintendent evaluation process.
Yes.
I just updated the timeline that we've used previously, just for consistency's sake. Totally open to however you feel, but what we've been doing typically is we take this information at the end of the year into consideration. At the meeting in July, I'll produce that year in review report for you that just kind of highlights the different things that we've accomplished district-wide over the course of the year. You would then complete your individual reports, submit them to the chair about a week later. The chair would then just compile them into a summative evaluation that ultimately we would share at the first meeting in August. And then obviously vote one way or the other to accept the evaluation. And then at the second meeting in August, we're able to kind of move forward and start talking about our goals for the coming year. So this has suited us well in the past. I'll kind of progress along this timeline unless anyone has any objections. But I think this allows us to kind of do the eval wrap up in July, early August, and then shift into next year's work at the end of August.
Any questions? I know everybody's been through the process before, so everybody good? Same document, same format as before?
And Maria loves it. We didn't want to change it.
I hate this form.
I don't love
Can't
it, but
stand
I
it.
know.
For
We
the
just-
superintendent's evaluation. And they were talking about changing this thing all the years that I've been on. the
3 or 4
school
years ago,
committee.
Had to
were
bring it
all-
up, Jay.
yeah,
Had to
we're
bring
gonna-
it up.
Every year.
Have to bring it
Every
up.
Had to
year.
poke the wound every
The
year.
P minus, it gets to them.
I know.
Yeah.
We're gonna be okay.
So we'll use the old form that we'll all just muddle through again. But we'll get that wrapped
love
up
it.
and then we'll get on to the next year. All right, next up is Joanna with a budget transfer.
Thank you. There's a memo in your packet requesting 3 budget transfers in fiscal 2025. The first one is requesting a shift of funds from the capital land and buildings account to the school security account for $38,033. And this is to fund the, this emergency notification system that Bill was just talking about that addresses the Claxton public address system. And the reason we have funds available in capital land and buildings is the committee had approved a one-time project of removing 4 accordion walls at McCarthy, and we are only doing 2. This was to keep it under the $50,000 threshold for going out to bid and everything. So that's the first one. I'm going to talk about all 3 and then take a vote individually.
Sure, yeah, you can do all 3.
Can I just real quick on that one? So I don't want people to be surprised. So next year for the one-time list, you'll likely see the other 2 walls coming down. It's not that we forgot about them. We just did not have time to do a public bid to do all 4 this summer. So we're going to do the 2 and then we'll put 2 on the list for next year. So there are still going to be 2 accordion walls at McCarthy that aren't going to come down this year. We'll address that in the summer of '26. Okay.
Can I ask another question about something you've just already shared with us? The one around the public address system, how many schools is this funding that for? Is this
That's the
just?
pilot at Harrington.
The pilot at Harrington.
Yeah.
Just confirming that I understand, because I was like, that is not a lot of money for the district, and I figured it was for the
That's
pilot.
just the pilot at
Yeah,
Harrington. Yeah.
okay.
Thank you. The second one is requesting a budget transfer into other instructional services for $12,440. And this is to fund, we are asking contractors to help us with some psychological evaluations. So that's the second one. And then the third one is requesting a budget transfer for $3,928 into the employee separation cost account. And this is to fund a portion of the retirement incentives that were scheduled to go in July of 2025, which is fiscal '26, but to pay them in June of 2025, which is fiscal '25. And that'll free up some funds in fiscal 2026.
So there must not be too many people retiring this year.
There were, but you have to be hired before a certain date to qualify for the incentive, and that number is going down.
The 3928 is just the balancing number.
Okay.
It was a bigger number
Okay.
in the account.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we'll do the first one first.
Sure. I move that we approve the FY 2025 local operating budget transfer for $38,033 from the account noted, which was capital land and building, to the other account, school security, as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further questions on this particular transfer? Okay, Susan,
Aye.
Anna,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I move that we approve the FY 2025 local operating budget transfer for $12,440 from SAL/Center Psychologist to other instructional services account as presented.
Second.
Okay, any questions on this transfer? Okay, Susan,
Aye.
Diana,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Aye.
I move that we approve the FY 2025 local operating budget transfer for $3,928 from SAL/Center Psychologist to employee separation costs account as presented.
Second.
Any questions on this one? Okay, Susan,
Aye.
Diana,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Right,
Thank you. Next item is just the personnel report for the month of May. May of 2025. So we are starting to see all of our new hires coming in on the list. So anyone that has an effective date of 8/25/25, these are new hires for the next year. So you have some new hires. You also have some resignations because these are people who are ending the end of this school year. And then actually no retirements and no assignment changes at this point. We are deep in the hiring for the fall. At the July meeting, I'll have a little update for you, just to show you like tracking and like what positions still remain open. But we've been making very good headway on hiring the teaching staff, professional staff in the district. So I'll report in July when we get back together where we're at, but we're doing pretty good for right now.
Yeah.
Any questions on it?
How are we finding the pool of candidates for these key positions? Because these are pretty key positions.
Yeah.
Psychologists and teachers.
To be honest with you, we're all filled now with the psychologists. So those are always typically hard to fill, and I believe we needed 3 of them. But we've hired the 3 psychologists, so that's been very good. We're starting to see the applicant pool come back for the general positions, so like your elementary general ed teachers, even like general special ed teachers. In some of the specialized programs, we're still not quite seeing the applicant pool that we had seen previously. Some of the specialty type jobs, like we do have 2 chemistry jobs at the high school, those are a little bit more difficult to fill. Like a world language job is still difficult to fill, but the more generalized positions, we're starting to get, again, good pools of applicants. But we are still having to do some extra recruiting for some of the more specialty jobs. But interestingly enough, we filled the psychologist job, so that's excellent.
That's good.
Those are hard to fill.
One I was surprised, Alexa Cunningham at the high school, the career readiness, is that?
Yes, she left us to take a position at UMass Lowell.
Okay, so that won't be a tricky one to fill, because
Yeah,
that's not
they're
a
in,
common job.
it's a different type of position. So they're in the process now of interviewing for that.
All right, any other questions on the personnel report? Okay, we have one field
And then
trip.
just one field trip. This is one additional field trip for ComEd, the Summer Quest program on July 7th, going to Block Party Social, which I'd never heard of before, in Hooksett, New Hampshire. But it looks like a pretty fun arcade type place for kids. And that's going to be one of their field trips in July. So I'd recommend approval.
Trips to New Hampshire. Okay. I move that we approve the Community Education Program Summer Quest, July 7, 2025, Block Party Social in Hooksett, New Hampshire field trip.
Second.
All right, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Yep. All right,
That's all I have.
any liaison reports?
I do. The McCarthy and Parker PTOs met on the 12th for their end of the year. They've both elected officers successfully. Some continue to be shared between the 2 schools. Some do not. They are hoping still to find people who might be willing to shadow behind the folks who are holding kind of dual positions, in hopes that eventually those can be more than one person for the role, such as treasurer. But both schools have had, as you might imagine, very busy ends of the school year. And sounds like all the big events went really well. Team Olympics were a highlight at McCarthy, and there was an increased emphasis this year on sort of a wide diversity of activities for that. The We Are Parker event is now being called the first annual We Are Parker event. They feel really good about how that went. Really highlighted how high staff involvement was in the event, and for an evening event, that's, notable. There were tons of kids in a cabaret show. There were badminton tournaments happening. There were tons of food trucks. I got to be there and enjoy it with the family. The food trucks, 2 of the 4 food trucks, the empanadas truck and, I can't remember one of the other trucks.
The chicken.
The chicken sold out,
I know.
which is great and should make it easier to recruit some trucks next year. There was one food truck that served Indian food that they were really hoping to get, but they were charging a fee because they just didn't have data to prove that they would be getting a lot of customers. So I think now, maybe next year, that can be a new addition, given that there were such large numbers of people. The really nice weather that day didn't hurt. The other couple of things to note, one is that at McCarthy, they had their first Scholastic Book Fair in quite a while. It was successful, but they are hoping to move it to the fall this year. So the hope is to really keep that kind of emphasis on getting students books and, keeping the excitement around literacy, even as they get to the upper middle school level. The other thing to name is that they're still trying to figure out how to get more attendance at these PTO meetings for the middle school levels. So they're experimenting next year with a mixture of remote and in-person meetings. They're going to keep the very beginning and very end of the year in person to kind of facilitate connecting with people, but to have a lot of the meetings in between that remote in hopes that more people will feel like they can attend regularly. So it'll be interesting to see how that pilot goes.
Anyone else with liaison reports?
I forgot one comment from the graduation. I don't know how everybody else felt, but it was so great to see the banners for each school and to see the staff who decided to attend. It was lovely.
I think you just made Linda's day.
Go on about those banners, a little bit more about those banners.
The banners were lovely. I just honestly think it means so much to so many different students to see their teacher there who helped them in second grade, first grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, whatever, and also all the high school staff. It was just great, absolutely. So kudos to doing that, and I hope it goes on. It was
Yeah,
great.
that was a nice addition.
Agree.
Right, anybody else? Okay, we had building committee last week. We're now into the designer selection process, so we kind of went through the timeline there. The IRS just went out recently, and we're supposed to get applications by the middle of next month. And then we're slated to meet with MSBA the end of August.
August 26th.
August 26th, yeah. So because of that, because we're kind of in that, we're not going to meet in July. We'll just meet in August as a group.
Correct.
And, and hopefully by the beginning of September, we'll have a designer, will be the next step.
We're off by about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, just because of the MSBA scheduling. So we do August 26th to shortlist the candidates. Then I want to say it's like September 9th, we come back and do the interviews. So we should have a designer selected and on board by September 15th, I'd say, which still puts us in very good shape to be able to get rolling right after Columbus Day.
And then the work will begin.
The work begins.
Yep. All right, any new items anybody has?
Just wondering if we have a sense of when we'll be able to look at the data from, I know the surveys have gone out about technology, policies.
Yeah, we got them out before the end of the year to just kind of
Yeah.
capture some data. So I still have left them open. I was going to leave them open right until like tomorrow, like the end of the school day. I will tell you that staff-wise, just numbers, Jill is going to do the analysis and kind of putting the data together for us. But we had approximately 250 staff members, teachers fill out the survey, which is very good.
Yeah.
And just shy of 2,000 respondents from families.
That's great.
So that's very good as well. So once we close them, she'll have some folks start to kind of go through that data. So at some point over the summer, I can give you like an early look at least what the trends are or some of the questions. She is going to have to do some coding and things like that to get at some of the narrative responses. But some of the quick charts, like the quick percentage responses, we'll be able to get back likely by the July meeting.
Yeah, I was thinking it'd be good to have that in hand as we think about next year's handbooks and things like that.
Yep.
It's great.
That's awesome.
Whenever we can, an update on, I believe that the first leasing and so on has started to happen in the project.
West
So
Campus.
whenever we can, have an update on that.
Sure.
Student
Yeah.
population.
I'll
Yeah,
double
the
check for.
Harrington PTO group was very interested in hearing about that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing registrants from that address, but I'll confirm and can let you know at the July meeting, but nothing is like tip on the radar at this point. And they did start leasing at the end of April, so.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen anything to make me nervous yet.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? I just have a couple reminders. Next Monday is town meeting. For those of you that are town meeting reps, we have 2 items that relate to the schools that were on our last agenda. South Throw roof and a couple elevators. We also have the 4th of July parade coming up.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
We already have all the supplies I've seen all ready to go. What is it, a Friday this year?
Friday,
Is it Friday this year?
Friday, yeah.
Friday the 4th, okay.
Friday the 4th.
We don't meet again until the 22nd next month, so we have the first meeting is off, so we have a good, nice 5 weeks off. Having said that, when we're done here, we could just kind of maybe compare calendars, maybe do an executive session in the next week or so, just to talk about negotiations and the status of that, so we can talk about that afterwards, though.
Great.
All right. No public comment that I know of. Anybody receive anything? Okay, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn, sorry.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
I win, Joe.